Hi, I'm Allie Hamilton, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the Come As You Are podcast. Every week, we'll be talking about some aspect of healing, usually around childhood wounds and complicated familial relationships. The topics will always coincide with my personal essay of the week, and this will be a place where we can take a deep dive together. I'm so thrilled you've joined me and delighted for you to always come as you are. Hi there. Hi there. Welcome to our talk. Today, the topic is some kind of liminal space. And I was writing about this kind of where I've been sort of experiencing life the last few days. I got back from New Jersey on Tuesday night. I was at my Aunt Louise's wake and funeral over the weekend. I flew in Saturday and I came back Tuesday. So it's a really short trip and very emotional. If you've been listening to the podcast, reading the essays, then my Aunt Louise was incredibly important to me and like a surrogate mom. And I grew up with my Aunt Louise, my Uncle Richie, and my 4 cousins for my early childhood. And so it was really painful to lose her. I saw her in May. She has had a series of mini strokes over the last few years, and they had slowed her down, but in no way did I think that would be the last time I saw her. So it was a shock. It was really heartbreaking and unexpected. Yeah. And so I flew back on Saturday and I stayed at my Aunt Louise's house. And my cousin Carol was there already when I got there, and she has 4 daughters. And Carol and her girls live in England, and 2 of her daughters are identical twins, just like my Aunt Louise and her sister, my Aunt Renee, were identical twins. So my cousin Carol's 2 daughters who are identical twins have been on multiple yoga retreats with me, very close to all of my cousins and all of my first cousins once removed, who I just call my little cousins, even though they're all basically in their 30s at this point and not, they're taller and they're not little, but that's what I call them. All of my cousins' babies, basically. And some of those babies have babies now. So the family has continued to grow and, expand as happens, which is beautiful, right? It's so gratifying for me that my cousins' kids are close with my own children, and we've traveled together. So all of that is comforting and incredible. And being in my Aunt Louise's house is always nostalgic for me. It's a funny thing. I mean, I've been there a lot over the last few years. I've made sure whenever I have gone back to New York, I've always gone to see her. And I have gone back to the East Coast more in the last 4.5 years. When my mom got sick, as soon as we could fly again during COVID, I started going back to New York all the time. And whenever I did that, I saw my Aunt Louise. So I've been writing about this a lot over the last couple of weeks. And it is all tied up. I think that when you have suffered a lot of losses close together, what tends to happen is that one grief sort of like opens the portal to all the other losses. It becomes kind of like this river of grief and loss, and it's very painful. But I'm in last week when I was recording the podcast, I think I was just there are a lot of tears and a lot of sadness. And this week I am feeling it was very comforting to be with family. And, I didn't have that when my mother passed away because it was during COVID times. We could not gather. And I think that is part of what led to just incredible feelings of isolation. And I think it made it a lot harder even than it already was, because I didn't get to have the experience that I just had this past weekend, which is not to say that it wasn't incredibly painful and emotional and sad and all of that, because of course it was, but it does make it easier when you are with a group of people who are mourning the same person and you are crying together and hugging each other and sharing memories and looking at old photographs and laughing. Like it's comforting. There's a reason that people have funerals. And so I want to talk about some of that today, and that's what I was writing about this week. Is I really feel in our culture we don't talk enough about death and dying and grief and loss. And when I started writing on Wednesday, I began writing Wednesday, like mid morning. I I had come out, and I flew in Tuesday night, and I, woke up Wednesday morning, and I have this new rescue dog, Rufus, right? And he's a puppy, and he's full of energy right now. He's kind of like starting to relax. I think he understands. He lives here, and he knows who, like, his people. He's understanding the rhythm of the house. It's good. And so he was out in the den with me, and I had already taught a private. I had a client come over. I had already taught a yoga private in the studio, and I was in the den, and I was feeling like I needed to start writing. And I actually had 2 essays going this week. I wrote an essay for someone else's publication this week as well. And so I was feeling a little bit of like, I got to get my brain, in gear here. But the way it works for me with writing is I can feel this kind of like, I don't know, pressure or like buzzing, like swirling thoughts. I knew what I was going to write about, but I need a phrase, I need a sentence, I need something to kind of coalesce out of that swirl so I can begin. And sometimes that thing doesn't even make it into the final draft. It's fine. I just need that to happen. And I was actually messaging with the person whose publication I was writing the other essay for, and I realized I thought it was Thursday as I was right, and I realized, wait a minute, it's Wednesday. I'm putting myself under all this pressure. I just realized like today is actually Wednesday, and I said I'm in some kind of liminal space right now, like both from being a little bit jet lagged, just feeling, and also this sense of time travel. And when I texted that, I thought that could be the phrase to get me going, and that might even be the title. And that ended up being the title, because that's very much how I felt. Like I'm not fully on West Coast time, and I'm not on East Coast time anymore, and I'm not like fully in the past. I'm not in my childhood years, but I'm not fully in my present. Like it just, and part of that was being in the house, which I think we're all familiar with that experience of how a place can bring you back. And that experience of walking into a place, and of course, I've been there so much in the last few years. This didn't happen this time, but that feeling of walking into a place and realizing it's a lot smaller than you thought it was. those memories of being in that house are so visceral, you know, they really live in my body. And I, when I'm in my Aunt Louise's kitchen, it's like I just am flooded with not just memories, but also a feeling of safety and being loved and feeling like everything is okay. And of course, being there this weekend and knowing like she's not here was really, it hurt. You know, it's really painful. And my Aunt Louise was, my book that came out in 2016 was on her bedside table. And a picture of me, you know, I don't know, in my 20s was like on her dresser. You know, I she just loved me in that way that certain people love you if you're lucky, like all the way. You know, she just loved me all the way and believed in me and had faith in me and, you know, just, I mean, treasured me, and you could feel it. And I was not alone in that experience with her. Her grandchildren felt that, her children felt that. But, you know, I just felt so fortunate to have her, especially because I did not get that from my mom. And I did get that from my grandmother, from my nanny, my mother's mother, but she passed away when I was 4. So if I had not had my Aunt Louise, you know, I had her, I mean, really until, I mean, I've had her till now. But after my mom and my stepdad got married, I saw my Aunt Louise, Uncle Richie, and my cousins less because then we were also seeing my stepdad's family. So it became less, and which was a loss for me. It was difficult for me. That was hard for me. It's not that I didn't see them at all. It's just I didn't see them nearly as much, and that was difficult. But as I got older and I was able to get there myself, you know, find my own way there, I did. So I think it's just unfortunate that, you know, there was at a time where it would have been really helpful to have that consistency, you know, I didn't, but I found it again. And, you know, so she's just been a constant in my life and somebody who was always there for me. And it really hurts to lose her. And as I got older, you know, our conversations changed, of course. When I was little, you know, they were one way. And even in my like 20s and 30s, she was always very much asking me like what was happening with me and what was happening with the kids. And, you know, but at a certain point, as I became a grown woman, you know, I'd say to her, like, how are you doing? Like, what's happening with you? And she, you know, my Aunt Louise went through a lot of loss herself. And I was thinking a lot about the women in my family. And my grandmother, my mother's mother, she was married, and she had my Uncle Richie, my mother's brother, right? She had him first. And her first husband died young. And when at a certain point she met my mother's father, Joseph Hamilton, and they got married and had my mother when my Uncle Richie was 11. So same mothers, different dads. And Joe adopted Richie. So my Uncle Richie became Richard Hamilton. So my mother had the same situation. She had me and then my brother, 2 different dads, same mom, same age difference between me and my brother as there was between my mother and her brother. And it just, you know, it just got me thinking about cycles and generational cycles and like how hard you have to work sometimes to break those and like, you know, exercise free will. And my mother was someone who really kept a lot of things close to the vest. She was not one to she had a difficult relationship with her dad. He passed away when she was 13, and she only ever had one picture of him out at all, and it was a picture of him in his full police uniform. It's the only picture I ever saw of her dad my entire life until this weekend. And I would ask her sometimes, like, what was he like? Or that must have been so hard for you to lose him at 13. And she said she was relieved because he was very strict and very hard on her. And when he died, she got to be with her best friend, her mom. I don't know what more there is to that story because she would not talk about it. She wouldn't share. But I saw pictures finally of my grandfather. This is my grandfather that I literally like never saw photos of as a real human being. I only saw him in the one picture in this uniform. I saw pictures of them together. I saw pictures of him at her birthday parties. I saw pictures of the two of them at the beach, things I just had never seen. And it really made me sad that I'll never get to really have those conversations with her about what was so difficult about their relationship other than he was strict, he was hard on her. She also said at another time that her mother and father wanted a baby so badly together. They had Richie from my grandmother's first marriage, but they wanted a baby together, and they were, praying and praying. These are Italian. Well, my grandmother's Italian Catholic, and Joe Hamilton is Irish Catholic. I mean, my grandmother went to the priest and is saying Novena. I mean, really. So it's so interesting. And that then when she was born, they were so happy and they loved her and, couldn't do enough for her. So it's just really interesting. Like, okay, so were they happy? I mean, I know her mother was. Her mother was the most loving, affectionate, couldn't give you enough love. But there were two different things that I was getting from her. One was that, her father was like so grateful that she was born and that she existed. And the other was this other thing of, he was really strict and she was relieved. So it's just sad to like not get to have the meat of that story, and so interesting to see those photos. And there are a lot of things with my mother that she really didn't, she would not have difficult conversations. She would not get help with the things that were hard. And I know it was difficult for her to like lose her dad at 13, lose her mom at 28. My dad left the next week. Then my uncle Richie ended up having a heart attack when he was 53. And so my mother's entire family of origin was gone when she was really young. And I know that trauma was part of what made things really hard for her and part of her drinking and all of that. But she just would not get help or admit that she needed help. And so some of that was like, in the mix this weekend when I was looking at these photos. I'm almost like excavating. I spent a couple of hours in the basement. There were some boxes of photos that never made it into albums, and I was just sitting on the floor like going through things, almost like I'm searching for my past. I'm searching for my like the stories, trying to piece things together. And it's really, I don't know. It's just it's a very interesting thing to have a mom like that who is not sharing these major parts of her own story for whatever reason, who just wants to edit out the difficult things. And you're left with this like desire to, be like an investigator. That's how I felt. I was like, just tearing through these things. At one point, one of my little cousins, she came, she's like, "Are you okay down here?" I was like, "I'm completely fine. I'm good." I was covered in photos. And I found amazing pictures of my grandmother, of my mother's mother. And I found pictures from my own childhood that I had never seen before, and pictures of my mom and dad together that I had never seen before, when I was tiny, when I was a toddler. So interesting. So there was a lot of that in the mix as well. And then my Aunt Louise is an identical twin, and her twin, my Aunt Renee, has Alzheimer's. And so Aunt Renee's daughter decided the most compassionate thing was to tell her mother the morning of the wake what had happened, because she's going to keep reliving it. And so that's what happened. And I'm going to talk about, and I was writing about some things that I think are hard for people maybe to think about, or, but I feel like this is part of why in our culture it's difficult. We don't talk about death and dying enough. And then when it happens for a lot of people, there's shock involved, and there's a lack of preparedness, I think. And it is the natural order of things. We are going to lose people. It's so hard. I think it's the hardest thing. I think of all the things, and there are a lot of really hard things, especially now. I think this one is the hardest because we love people. There are people that you treasure with your entire being. And it's so difficult to not know how long you have, how long they have, like what happens after this. We all have our ideas. We don't know for sure. That's so vulnerable. That's so intense to have to really wrap your head around that. And I've had to work the other way, meaning I think when I went through childbirth with my son, and it was really touch and go for both of us for the better part of 12 hours, it changed me. And I think I realized how fragile life is, and how I think prior to that experience, I felt like when you're here on this planet with your feet planted, you're a lot more like solid than you are. And that like death is this thing that, can't touch you unless something really, really awful happens, right? A serious disease, or, or an accident, or obviously other things happen where people are in intense emotional pain and they can't take it anymore. But I think when I went through that experience with my son, I realized it's like a thin veil. It's like we're so fragile. Our hold on this life is so fragile. And that's such a painful thing to accept, that like it could all, I mean, I don't even want to say it, but it's like I can't even count on being here the rest of the day. Like, I mean, I certainly hope to be, and I want to be here for many, many, many days, years, decades. But I'm just saying, I think I realized like everything can change in an instant. And this idea that we have that we're so solid is false. And I think when you wrap your head around that, it's difficult. I had to like work the other way and say to myself, listen, you can't live in fear. Especially I bring this tiny, well, he wasn't tiny, but he was almost 9 pounds, but this baby home from the hospital. And I had just had this experience, and I like didn't want to be fearful. I didn't want to be crushed by my own panic that something might happen to him. I knew that wouldn't be good for him or for me. So to really work on having faith that it was all gonna, we were gonna be okay. We had lived through that experience. We were gonna keep living through, we were gonna have joy, and we were gonna have memories, and we were gonna do things, and I was going to be able to show him things and watch him grow and just like have some faith in that. And but I think some trace of that has stayed with me. But I like to think it's the right amount because I don't take anything for granted. I don't take a single day for granted. And I really try to make sure the people I love know how I feel. I try to make sure I do that every day and show that. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's good to have that awareness in your being, in your mind, in your heart, to the right degree, not to the degree that you're scared to do things or that you're constantly anxious or worried. That's no good. You want to live your life joyfully, and you want to be open, and you want to try things and do things and like suck the juice out of every moment. But enough that you're not wasting time, or you're not saying the hard things, or you're not like staying in a situation that doesn't feel right for far too long. You just want to make sure that you're not saying to yourself, well, I'll start living when things calm down, and I'm saying that to you knowing that sometimes everyone has chapters where you're just trying to keep a roof over your head. And I get that very, very well. That's not what I'm talking about, because you can be in a chapter like that and still make sure that you are prioritizing the people in your life and that they know how you feel, and trying to find some beauty in the day, even if you're in a situation where your focus has to be keeping a roof over everybody's heads. You can still do that and make sure that you're, not forgetting like what life is about. It's hard, it's hard. Sometimes it's really hard, but that's kind of like where I've been for a long time. But the death part of things, and I mean like the really intricate parts there at the end, I don't think we talk about enough. And that's some of like what happened this weekend. I have trauma that I have been working on since my mother died. I was in the room with her, and I was in the room with my dad. He passed away at about 2:30 in the morning, and I was asleep. And so the police actually came and knocked on my door at like, it was a little bit before 7, maybe like 6:45 in the morning. And then I went out and I was in the room with him and all of that. But and that was not traumatic, but maybe it's because I had already been through it with my mother. That was in 2023. And maybe it's because, I think my dad was also 96, and he was in hospice, like in an assisted living facility. I had a hospice team, with him. And it was like, and I had just been there the day before. And, it was just a different experience. He wasn't suffering the way my mother suffered, and also had a much different relationship with him, like much different. But for whatever reason, it wasn't easy. I think it's very intense to be in a room with the body of someone you love. Like, it's hard. But I don't feel like it was traumatic with my dad. With my mom, it really was. And there are a number of reasons, that I'm pretty clear on. But because of that, I was a little scared they did an open casket for my Aunt Louise. I was a little scared, a little anxiety about it. Wasn't sure how that was going to feel for me, or, and also just like how I feel about that at all. And I'd had that once before when I was 10 with my dad's dad. There was an open casket for him, and I remember I remember that experience. But what I ended up feeling this weekend with my Aunt Louise is that I think the impetus to do it is I understand it. I think it's so that people who have not had a chance to say goodbye in person have that opportunity. And I think the effort is there to make the person look as much like they looked in life as possible, to put them in clothes that they wore and jewelry, and to have their hair done and their makeup done and whatever, so that they look as lifelike and as much like themselves as it's possible to make them look, so that people who have not had an opportunity to say goodbye, to say whatever they need to say, can do that. I think for many people it is comforting. And so I think whatever discomfort I have, I think it might be outweighed by the closure that I think it does give to some people. And my Aunt Renee came into this room, and she looks just like my Aunt Louise and sounds just like my Aunt Louise. So you can imagine, for a room full of people who are grieving this person, to have someone walk in who looks and sounds just like the person you're grieving is like, it's painful, it's surreal, but your heart goes out to this person because this is their identical twin. And my Aunt Louise and her sister, Aunt Renee, they were like so close their entire lives. I saw so many pictures of them as children this weekend that I had never seen before. And so it was heartbreaking, and she had just found out, and so she was beside herself, and I'm sure it must be so strange to see your identical like, it's just got to be, really rough. And I hadn't seen Aunt Renee in a long time, and she recognized me, but I don't think she knew. In fact, I know she didn't know how she knew me. She just knew that she knew me and that I was family, but she did not know like whose daughter I was or whose sister I was. She just didn't know how she knew me. But she was very much like, hugging me and holding my hands, and she wanted me to sit next to her. So I was sitting next to her, and at a certain point she said, I haven't been able to go up there yet. She wanted to go up to the casket. So my cousin Kim and I said to her, do you want to go up there? And she said yes. So we brought her up there, and she just, totally fell apart and was like stroking her sister's arm. It was just, and that, of course, like every time she started crying, everybody started crying because it was just like devastating. But it did make me feel like maybe the open casket is good, because people have an opportunity to, I don't know, to be with the person in some way that feels like closure. So that happened. The next day was the funeral, and I'll just share, we were, the funeral, it's Italians say goodbye and then they say goodbye again. And I was like, I cried so much. But I think it's really good, it's like a proper send off, you're having like a lot of opportunity to really give this person, like, honor them and celebrate their life and tell them how you feel and thank them. I went up to the casket multiple times and talked to her and thanked her. And even though I know she's not there, I knew she's not there anymore. But after the funeral, there's a meal, so we go to this restaurant, and Aunt Renee is there, and I'm talking to her, and I said to her, I was like, I saw Aunt Louise in May, and I want you to know she was talking about you and how much she loves you, and I don't want you to have any. She knew how much you loved her. She loved you. I just did not want her to have anything. She was just, like thanked me. It was like, crying. And then all of a sudden, she was like, Allie, you're the ballerina, which I have not, I have not been on point since I was 16 years old. But she instantly, it was like, it's at that moment, which is what happens with Alzheimer's. People have a moment of lucidity where they're just, or they'll have like a 10 minutes where they're like fully back, and that happened. She was like, Kathy's daughter, like, I haven't seen you in so long, and Louise cherished you, and I have your book. I mean, it was just like, it was unbelievable. It was like she was seeing me for the first time, and she hugged me and she was crying. It was just like, it was so beautiful and also sad, and just all of it. And a lot, like, people spoke about my Aunt Louise and how much she meant to them. And so all of those things are incredibly beautiful. I think that, like, what I ended up walking away with is, as much as maybe the open casket thing can be a little uncomfortable, because you can feel it's the person's body, right? They're not there anymore, and it's very clear. But there's still something sacred about the person's body. And that is the part, I think, that is really painful for me when I think about my mom and what happened in that room after she passed. It was obviously, the hours leading up to the moment that she passed are very painful for me to think about, but they're less painful than the hour after. And if I could go back in time and be prepared for that hour, I would be prepared much differently. And I think that's part of, like, I think part of the reason I wasn't prepared differently is because of the lack of conversation, of this kind of conversation. And so I'm going to share some of it. I can't share all of it because I won't make it through. But what I will say is that my mother was in the hospital. We were trying to get her home for hospice care. She didn't make it home for that. They were giving her hospice care in the hospital at that point. They had not moved her to the hospice part of the hospital yet because things happened very quickly and there wasn't room yet in the hospice part of the hospital. So she was receiving hospice treatment in the regular part of the hospital. I was holding her hand, stroking her hair, talking to her the last few hours of her life, telling her not to be scared. I could feel her. I could feel whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter to me if we call it her soul or her energy or whatever you want to call it. It's just whatever, the collection of cells that made my mother. I could feel that energy hovering sort of like half in her body and half like just above it, like right over her heart. It's like hard to describe, but let's say a normal, it's going to sound so strange, but I'm really trying to give you a visual, but it was sort of like a pillow sized, like a bed pillow that you put your head on every night, like a fluffy bed pillow sized ball of energy that was sort of like half in her body and half above it. And I could feel that when I got there. I flew in, and I could feel it like that for the last few hours of her life as I was holding her hand and stroking her hair and talking to her and telling her not to be scared. And I was saying a lot of things to her, like, your mom is waiting for you, your dad is waiting for you, Uncle Richie's there, like, little Richie is there, like, don't be scared, Mom, like, it's okay, like, you're safe, it's okay. And don't worry about, I didn't want her to worry about my stepdad or my brother. I was like, I'm going to take care of everything, and we're going to miss you, but we're going to be okay. Like, I don't want you to worry. I've got this. Like, it's okay, And I just kept saying things like that to her. And, hoping that they were true, hoping that her mother's there waiting for her and her dad, like there are things you can't know for sure. But I was just trying to say things to her that I hoped were true, that I knew would be comforting, and making promises to her that I knew I could keep, about my brother and my stepdad and all of that. And promises that I knew she needed to hear so she could go with ease. And I felt it when it happened. I felt when she left her body. I felt it. I felt it the minute it happened. And the doctor came in. The nurses came in first, and they must see, there must be something they see on the screen or something, because they came in like a minute, 2 minutes after, and were checking the monitors and looked in her eyes with a light and all of that. And I said, she's gone. And they said, we're going to get the doctor. They can't tell you. And the doctor came in, and he did the same kind of thing. He was looking at everything, and he looked in her eyes, and then he said, she's passed. I said, I know. And he called the time of death, which was 3:37 a.m. And then he turned off the BiPAP machine, which had been breathing for her, and he took it off of her face. And that part was really, really painful. And I still suffer because of that. Just, yeah, it just wasn't, she did not look at peace. And I think that's all I can say about that. But I had to then wake up my brother and my stepdad and tell them, because they had fallen asleep. And so that is terrible news to have to deliver. And then what ended up happening beyond that, my stepdad could not, it's very hard. Like, he couldn't stand it. And so he was covering her, and I don't think my brother or I were ready for that yet. We had a family friend come and take him home, and we stayed with my mother. But the nurse came in, and she said, when you call the cremation place, my mother wanted to be cremated, tell them that she's in the hospice part of the hospital, because she was about to be. And if you tell them that she's in the regular part of the hospital, they won't come right away. But if you tell them she's in the hospice part, they'll come instantly. They'll come now. And that's what you want. You want them to come in the next hour. And so I said, okay. She said, it's okay. She's like, it's totally legit. She's receiving hospice care. The doctor's signing the death certificate. Don't worry. So I said, okay. I don't know. So I called and I said, I'm here. My mom has passed, and she's in the hospice part of the, and he said, okay, I'll be there. And if, I'll be there, like, I think he said I'll be there by 5:00. So that was like more than 12 hours later. So I said, okay, I've never been through this before. The nurse comes back, and he said he'll be here by 5 p.m. She says, no, that's not right. Call him back and tell him she's in the hospice part of the hospital. He should be coming now, not like in 12 hours. So I called again. I said, hey, I think maybe there's, I don't really know. I think there's maybe some confusion. Like, she's in the hospice. The nurse is telling me to call you back and just let you know, like, she's in the hospice part of the hospital. I think she's expecting that you're going to be coming a lot sooner. And he's like, I can't, I don't, I'll be there. He's like, I'm going to take really good care of your mom. I don't want you to worry, but I don't have a truck. I can't come right now. I will be there as soon as I can. And, you shouldn't be worrying about this. Like, I will be there. I will let you know when I have your mother. Like, don't worry. So I said, okay. And I get off the phone. Nurse comes back a third time. She's like, sometimes they want money, but don't say that. She's like, call back because this isn't right. Call back. Don't say money. Just say, is there anything I can do to get you to come now? So now I'm feeling like really uncomfortable. I don't want to be doing this. I just want to be with my mom. I don't want to call someone 3 times ever, That's just not in my personality. But I call back and I'm like, hey, is there anything that you can, is there anything I can do to get you to come now? What she said to me is, sometimes they want money. Ask if there's anything you can do to get him to come now. Otherwise, we're going to end up having to put your mother in the morgue, in a drawer. So I'm now envisioning my mother like in a refrigerated drawer, which is like not what you want to be thinking about. So I called him back a third time and I'm like, is there anything that I can do to get you to come now? And now I'm like crying. I'm like, is there anything I can do? Because I don't want her to be in the morgue. Like, I don't want her to be in a drawer. And he was like, listen, this is so strange. Like, in 30 years, I've never had this happen. This nurse should not be talking to you this way. This shouldn't be on your mind. This shouldn't be a thing that you're even thinking about. Like, this is not normal. He's like, I've already got the death certificate. Like, they're like rushing things. I don't know what's happening there, but this is not right. And I will get there as fast as I can. And I will take really good care of your mom, but I can't, there's nothing I can do. So I got off the phone. She came back in and I'm like sobbing now. I'm like, I can't, there's nothing he's telling me. There's nothing he can do. And, so she shook her head and she's like, well, you guys can have 45 minutes and then we're going to have to take her. So she left. And, we were just like there with my mom and it's very hard, it's very hard. It's like, it is just your mother's body, but it's your mother's body and it's sacred. Like, it is. It's like, those are the hands you've always known and, the face you've always known, the eyes you've always, it's your mother. And so, I just was not, there was nothing, I didn't have any, like, I wish I'd had something like a silk scarf to wrap her. My mother loved beautiful things, I just wish I had things with me to wrap her in, flowers to put around her. I wish I'd had like a couple photographs of us to like leave with her body, a note. I wish I could have lit a candle, opened the window, like things, some kind of like ritual, warmth, beauty, something to bring into that room that was just really cold and antiseptic and just not, it just wasn't anything. And then after 45 minutes, we were crying and it was rough. They came in and they said, okay, we need you to step back, which I don't know why they didn't say you guys should leave the room, but they didn't. And they came in with a gurney and they picked her up, put her on the gurney and zipped her into a body bag and wheeled her out of the room. And that is unfortunately, what happened. And I think everyone needs training. I think, it's unfortunate because the hospital was amazing up until then. It was amazing. The social worker there was incredible. The doctors, the nurses, incredible. I think, it's strange because the same thing happened during my childbirth experience with my son. I had a nurse who was unbelievable for the first shift, and then the shift changed, and I had a nurse who just was not it. And it can really change everything. And I'm not blaming this nurse. I think she was really trying to help, but unfortunately, like, it didn't work. And so what I was left with is just watching that happen, watching my mother be and knowing she was going to go be put in a refrigerated drawer, in a body bag. Like, it's just not, it's just not, that's just not good. And we ended up leaving. My brother, after that happened, he was like, looked at me and was like, what do we do now? We were just in the empty hospital room. And I'm older, like, I'm supposed to know what to do. And I said, I think we just should take her things and go home. So we did. We collected her things and we went down to the street. It was December in New York. It was freezing. He wanted to take the train, the subway. I was like, we're not taking the subway. We took a cab home, and that was it. And then I slept for like 2 hours, and when I woke up, my stepdad was really struggling, and he could not have all of her things around. I was talking about that last episode. So that is the state of mind I was in when I was packing up all of her things. And I wish that, there are death doulas now, which I think is great. But I really think, not everybody can afford everything, especially now with what is happening in this country. We've got, like, I don't know what is going to happen with Medicaid. They're gutting it. And the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, premiums are about to, I think, go way up because those subsidies that were making things affordable are not being extended after the end of the year. So I don't know what is going to happen, but I'm very aware that all of these services, I think it's beautiful for people who are going into that field. I think it's needed. So please don't misunderstand me. I think if you are a death doula, that is so beautiful, like, because people need that. But I also think we all need that kind of training in how to support people who are going through those end of life losses, because what happened in that hospital, like, that added so much suffering to an already traumatic experience. And it's been really hard to recover from. And I have a lot of tools, and it's been really hard. So that's part of what I felt this weekend, is as heartbroken as I am to not be able to call my Aunt Louise, and I not be able to go to the house and see her. And I'm very grateful that we were able to gather and give her the kind of send-off she deserved, and be together and cry together and laugh together and hug each other. Like, I'm really grateful that we all had that, because I feel a lot better right now. I feel, like we did right by her. And I think a lot of people during COVID, it was very hard to do right by people anyway. My mom had a Zoom memorial, when we finally interred her ashes, it was just me, my stepdad, and my brother, because it was so long after she had passed. It was like, it was a couple of years had gone by. I think a lot of people went through that, and that is really painful. But I think generally, just especially if you're in a hospital environment, having more preparedness for the family members and also for the staff. Nurses, in my experience, have been incredible. Most nurses, most people drawn toward that work are amazing human beings, the most compassionate, incredible human beings, we have really. But you can get unlucky. And, I just think that there really needs to be this basic training for all people that death is part of life. Unfortunately, we lose people. And the parts that we consider like morbid, like, oh, I don't want to talk about the body. I don't want to talk about it's like we need to be able to have those conversations too. And I think people put off like making a will and specifically writing about what they want to happen. My mother had no will. Even in that last year that she was dying, she would not talk about that. She was in denial. It makes it a lot harder on the people that you leave behind when they have to sort of guess at what you might want. I just think there needs to be a lot more open conversation about all of this, and it would create a lot less suffering ultimately. And, I'm always one for like, let's try to have more compassion and less suffering and more ways to comfort each other and more ways to be there for each other. And, I'm sharing this today. It's not easy, but if I could even spare one person from feeling that feeling, I think even in the best of circumstances, it's really intense to be in a room when someone that you love passes away, and being able to talk about that experience, I think, is really important. But certainly, if you're going to be in a hospital setting, to have some preparation. I think if we had been in the hospice part of the hospital, maybe it would have been different and there would have been more support like that. It happened quickly at the end. And so I think that's part of what happened too. I think we did get unlucky, but there just luck shouldn't be part of it. It shouldn't be like that. It should be just like, hey, this person their vital signs aren't looking great. They're not really, they're in and out of consciousness. They're mostly unconscious. Like things are looking a certain way here. The family needs to get some, a phone call or some paperwork or something about what they might want to bring to the hospital. Something. Anyway, I wanted to share that. And I hope that, I hope it's helpful in some way. I really do. I don't think it's ever going to be, I don't think loss ever gets easy for any of us, I think attachment it leads to suffering. That's part of, that's like that's a Buddhist principle, and that's in the yogic philosophy, and it's a real thing, but part of the human experience is we're going to be attached to people, and we're going to be attached to their well-being. We're going to be attached to their happiness and their health. We're going to be attached to the sound of their voice, the sound of their laughter. We're going to be attached to being able to hug them and see them and talk to them. And when we can't do those things, we're going to suffer. And that's part of sort of the contract that we sign when we love people. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm still going to love people all the way. But it would be nice if we could be prepared when we lose people to feel like we're ready to honor them in whatever ways. I've done everything I can, and I continue to do that. I lit a candle for my mother at the church the other day. Like, I do things all the time. It's not like you only get the one shot to, to honor someone right when it's just that I think those moments stay with you. And so the more we talk about it, the less likely it is that you're going to end up feeling like you weren't prepared in the ways that you wished you had been. It's not a good feeling. And so I just wanted to head it off at the pass. There are people who will help. If you're somebody who hasn't written a will or you feel uncomfortable about it, you can certainly like download one off the internet, but there are also people who will help with that. It is good to really think about what you want and to be specific about it. And the more detailed you are, if you have family members, the less they have to figure out on their own when they're in the midst of like intense grief. So all those things, I know we don't like to think about it, but it's good to think about. If you think of it as a gift you're giving the people that you're leaving behind, it makes it easier. And it also makes it easier to really live. And that's the whole point of what I'm talking about. When I started writing the essay, my new rescue, Rufus, was at my feet, and he was right where Chewy used to be. Chewy passed away in October. I was saying that when I went this weekend, I wear my grandmother's engagement ring. I've been wearing it since my mother died. She used to wear it. And it's my nanny's engagement ring. And my mom wore it. And when I go, my daughter will wear it. That's the tradition. So I was wearing that. I always do. But I also was wearing my mother's pearls. And I sort of felt like I was bringing my mother and my nanny with me to say goodbye to my Aunt Louise, and that they could sort of be here with me, and also hopefully there with her. And that I felt like I was in some kind of liminal space in between, I've been feeling a lot of the women in my life this week, and I hope they're up there together. I now have my nanny, my Aunt Louise, and my mom, So anyway, I'm sending you a lot of love. I am okay. Family really makes all the difference. And my cousin Diane has two boys who are awesome, Adam and Vincent. And, it was really, really good to be with the four cousins I grew up with, and then all of their kids. My cousin Joey's got kids, my cousin Diane, all of my cousins, my cousin Richie. So it was really nice to be with everyone. And there's Rufus sneezing. I don't know if you can hear that. All right. I love y'all, I'm here if you need anything. Certainly if you have any questions, you know where to find me. I'm sending you lots of love until next time.